Good morning, Year 11. So this is a really quick tutorial style video in order to help you with a drawing technique which is called exploded drawings. You will be quite familiar with this from having completed our screwdriver question this week or last week. So the exploded drawing, it kind of shows you how a product is going to fit together through the use of a dashed line, which hopefully you can see on my page here. So by the end of this lesson, what I'm looking for is a submission on Show My Homework of a product of your choice drawn in an exploded view. Now, what I would say is when you're selecting your product, please don't choose anything that's going to be really complicated and take you hours to draw. So you'll see for the benefit of this kind of tutorial that I've chosen to do a pen. It would be great if you could choose something that wasn't a pen, because obviously this is part of my demonstration. So it'd be great if you could choose something a bit different. So you'll see on my page here that I have laid it out with a 1 centimetre border. If you were doing this in exam, you obviously wouldn't waste time creating a 1 centimetre border, but for the purposes of a demonstration and for our lesson, if we were doing things really well and we were really conscious of our presentation and taking pride in our work, we would make sure that we have a 1 centimetre border around our page. And then across the bottom, whenever I show you an engineering drawing, be it in a practical lesson, it would usually have these details across the bottom, so it would tell you who is responsible for it, what date it was drawn, what the title of the product was, and so on. So in our desk light practicals, or when we've done practical making the desk tidy, or even as far back as the mood light in Year 7, whenever we project our engineering drawings on the board, you should see these details, and most of the time you'll see Mrs. Day's drawing. Mrs. Day would be responsible for the drawing, and maybe it would be checked by another member of staff, for example. You can think about why these details would be important. So if you were in an engineering setting in manufacturing, it's really important obviously that somebody checks the work against the drawing, because it means that there is less room for error. Okay, so in order for us to get started, what you are going to need access to is some plain paper. I've already put my border around it and I've just started to fill out the bottom boxes. You are also going to need a ruler, a pencil, which I would advise that you sharpen just to make sure that it's nice and neat and not blunt across your page. And then obviously you'll need a rubber if you make any mistakes, but also you're going to need a product to actually disassemble. So I am going to just take apart, just for the purposes of ease really, I'm going to use a pen. And if you take them apart, sometimes they have little like springs and things like that inside them. So again, just make sure that you have all of the pieces of your product. So just be mindful that you're going to try and fit this on a page. So for some of you, if you're taking apart a larger item, the box here that says scale is going to be really important. So it might be that you measure something and then you half the scale so that it fits on your page. It really depends what the product is that you are doing. So ideally what you're aiming to produce today is a product that is drawn in exploded technique, but also drawn to scale. So I'm just going to put my pieces out just on the paper there, and then I'm going to fill in the details across the bottom. So this product has been drawn by myself for the purposes of the video. The date will be the 13th of January because obviously we're doing this in our lesson. Checked by, I'm going to leave that blank for now. Nobody's going to check this work, but obviously if you were doing this, you would put your name here, and then you could actually put my name here because I'm the one that's going to be checking your work for accuracy. The title, you could just put the exploded drawing of a pen or whatever the product is. For scale, I'm going to draw mine to scale. My pen would fit on my page, so it just makes life a little bit easier because I can measure it and draw exactly the same. And then projection, the angle will be shown within ours. You will also need a parts list. So when it comes to writing a parts list, you will literally write down all of the different parts within your pen. So I might put on here pen casing. That's my pen casing here. Then I would have this part, which is going to be the kind of ink refill, I will call that. This part here, this is like the casing that goes inside the pen, and this is obviously the bit where the nib goes. But this also is a spring that would be within the sort of casing itself, so you wouldn't see this on the pen, but obviously it is a part of it. So on here I might just put internal spring, and then annoyingly I've not left myself much room here, but so I'm just going to put 4. I will just put on there pen nib. Okay, and then when we start to draw an exploded drawing, what we tend to do is use a dashed line which goes across our page to connect all of the pieces together. So what I would advise, it doesn't really matter if you do it straight across or diagonally. I think things tend to look better diagonally and it gives you a little bit more space on your page. So what you will need to do is draw a dashed line to show how all of the parts connect. And when you do this dashed line, I would really encourage you to do this very, very lightly in pencil, because obviously this isn't part of the actual product. It's part of your drawing, but not the product. So when you have that dashed line, you'll take away your ruler and it just gives you the central line in order to space out all of the different parts for your pen. Now I'm going to start at the top here. So I'm going to do the part 1 is the pen casing first. So I'm looking specifically at this part. It's up to you how you draw this. So you could do it literally from the straight angle, or you could do it from the side. So I might do mine from the side just so that you can see that part here where the clip is at the top. And my life is a little bit easier because I've drawn it to scale. So I'm literally going to measure each part so that I know exactly how big I need to draw on my on the paper. Now remember that when we're doing this, we work in millimeters, and then when we start to draw, please don't be tempted to cheat. So some people might just draw around the actual pen, which is cheating. You need to make sure that you try and do this as accurately as possible. And also when you're doing this, please try and look at any sort of angles. I don't know how well the camera might pick up on this, but the actual pen top is curved. It's not completely straight. So when you're doing this, you are going to need to kind of mark out and just be mindful that I might need to do something. So I've done that as a straight line to start off with, but I might then just go over it a little bit harder just to curve it so that it's really clear that that is a curved edge on the pen. And then you will literally start to draw all of the different parts of your pen. Now, I've pressed down quite hard on my pencil here, because I have done this obviously a few times before. So I would really encourage you to do this really lightly to start off with so that you can get rid of any mistakes that you might make. And then you will take the next part. So the next part, that's obviously my pen casing. I will add the details later that show the lid. There's no need really to put the patterns and everything on it. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but for the purposes of this, I'm going to keep it quite simple. So the next part will then be the ink refill. Just remember again on your parts list, number 2, ink refill. So that needs to be the second part. And again, you will just leave a little bit of a gap and then you will line up. Now again, you could just mark whether you're going to start and where you're going to finish. Or failing that, you should be measuring, and just be careful of anything that gets tapered. So for example, the ink refill on here, there's a part that's just tapered and it goes narrower at the end. So again, you're going to need to try to measure all of the different parts and ensure that that is communicated on your drawing. So I'm just going to try and do that now for you. And you will start to see that you will build up your drawing quite quickly. Again, it depends the sort of product that you have chosen in order to do this. And one of the other things that I would say that you could do is once you've finished with your drawing, you can then start to use a fine liner. If you've got one at home, you could use a fine liner in order to kind of present in a bit of a neater way and just make it stand out a little bit bolder. Okay. So at the moment it's not looking too detailed, so I can go back and add any extra details, but for the moment the fact is that I'm trying to draw how the pen is connected, and I can then, obviously it's to scale as well, I've measured each part, but the important thing is that they all follow that dashed line, which is your central line. For anything that has like slightly weird dimensions, just try and get it as accurate as you possibly can. So if you're measuring something that's really small, try and get it as accurate as you possibly can on here. So I've purposely chosen something that's not going to have really tricky or fiddly parts to measure. But when it comes to drawing things like a spring, so it's 2 centimeters, this spring. But obviously drawing it is then quite tricky because it's not just a solid part. So what I'm going to do is draw some guidelines across my page that is 2 centimeters. And then for the actual spring, I don't know how well you're going to see this, but for the actual spring, I might just try and draw like a coiled shape. And obviously the parts list is there to help you identify what this part actually is. So that's going to be my spring. And then the final part will then be part 4, which we've already identified is the pen nib. I'm just going to measure that for you. And again, on this one, there is some more detailed parts to this. So it is chamfered at the end, and the shape of it isn't just a complete sort of cylindrical tube. There is some sort of more narrower parts at the end as well. So I'm just going to quickly draw that onto here. And then you can then go back and start to add any just sort of finer details. For your lesson on Friday, guys, it will be on Show My Homework. The next part of the lesson will be enabling you to look on YouTube and kind of teach yourself some of these techniques. So hopefully this video will be good for getting you started. And some of you also had a go at doing this the other day when we had the screwdriver exam question. So some of you have had a bit of technique and practice at doing this. There we go. So you can see that the central line connects everything together. You might then want to go back and add little features. So for example, this part here, again, I could just literally just draw roughly where the line is. And then just be careful that when you're looking at it, that you're looking at it from the top down. So you'll notice on here that the angle, okay, again, you should be measuring this just to double check. So I'm going to measure how far down the pen lid actually comes. It's about 4 centimeters. Just mark it there. And then with anything that is curved, you will kind of need to do this freehand. Now this is a technique that you can work with quite easily in an exam situation. So I would imagine that a lot of you might have a go at actually doing this technique if you were faced with an exam question where you're asked to produce a product in this style. So on here, that's kind of the basics of it. You've got your parts list. Once you've got your parts list down, you then do need to label each part just so that it doesn't cause any confusion. So on here, I would literally label 1, 2, 3, 4, making sure that all the 4 parts link up to the 4 parts that I have here on my parts list. All that's left to do now is to use a fine liner and just neaten up any areas, get rid of any sort of little lines that perhaps I've marked out just for guidance. So once I have neatened up my drawing, I will then post the picture on Show My Homework so that you can see the finished piece. Hopefully that was useful, guys, and I look forward to seeing your work and what products you decide to produce in an exploded drawing today.